Ladies and gentlemen, a week ago I came to you and I said, let's start a conversation on race. And for the last week, I've been having different conversations with multiple people, and I'm going to be bringing those conversations to you over the next several days. You're going to see one every day. I'll be posting it, and I hope you will check it out. Now, years ago, I met a woman who will always hold a special place in my heart because she was able to identify something in myself that I was oblivious to. We had hung out a few times. We were friends and we'd hung out a few times. And she said, Keith, you don't like talking about yourself. Now, before I go any further, some of you are going to say, well, Keith, you blog, you talk about things. Well, yeah, I talk about movies. I talk about TV shows. I talk about tech. When it comes to myself, I'm somewhat private. I didn't identify that at the time, but I do now. And one of the things she said, you know what, you're very good at getting people to open up to you and you know, for lack of a better term, tell you their life story. But anytime the conversation comes to you, you kind of turn it back on the person and get them to talk about themselves more. And she said, because we love doing that as a people don't even notice it. And I thought about that. And I thought to myself, it's nothing that I've ever consciously done, which is 100% right. I don't love talking about myself. The reason I tell you that story is because this whole exercise today is going to be very therapeutic for me. And I'm sure it's going to make her very proud, because today I want to talk to you about some of my experiences as a Black man throughout my life. This is not going to be the Keith Whittier story. I still want for the book to come out, but this is kind of going to be kind of a shortened version of some of the different experiences I've had. And I can tell you, some of the experiences I've had, I don't think they're very unique in that if you talk to other people of color, they will be able to give you very similar experiences to things that they've had to go through. So I think the best place to start is with my parents. My parents met in Trinidad. Then my mother moved to Canada first for school because my uncle was here and she came and she was staying with him going to school. Then shortly thereafter, my father, being the hopeless romantic he is, couldn't live without her, moved here. They ended up getting married. And I think that's kind of where I got like my romantic side from. They had my brother, and who was, you know, great. But then several years later, my assumption is they probably looked at my brother and said, he's pretty good, but we can do better. And then they had me. I can tell you that growing up, I had two sets of godparents, my Auntie Diane and my Uncle Tony, my Auntie Helen and my Uncle Ed. Uncle Tony, Auntie Diane, and Auntie Helen were all from Trinidad. Now, what I want you to know is that my Auntie Helen is white, and so is Uncle Ed. The reason I bring that up is for a couple of reasons. Number one, I get a kick out of the fact that this woman who is short, you know, shorter than I, short, first of all, extremely passionate, very sweet, but as soon as she opens her mouth, she lays absolutely no doubt that she is from the Caribbean with probably one of the most amazing accents you will ever hear. The second thing is both of my godparents showered my brother and I with love. And I will tell you, to this day, I always joke, I don't know that my Auntie Helen knows my name. I mean, I'm sure she does because it's written on the cards, but she's never in my time I can ever recall her ever calling me Keith. It's always honey, sweetheart, love, some wonderful adoration, some wonderful nickname like that. And if she was ever to call me Keith, I would sincerely think I've done something terribly wrong. So I grew up, you know, with lots of love around me. We'd have lots of sleepovers at both sets of godparents' house. And so from that perspective, didn't grow up with any sort of preconceived notions of different races, just in the fact that, you know, people that my parents brought in to our circle were going to be very kind to my brother and I. Grade school, I can tell you that I was one of two Black kids at the school. The other one being my friend Lynette, who to this day refers to me as her childhood friend. For the most part, that was fine. There was a couple of instances here and there from like grade 1 to 6. Of course, a lot of us are familiar with that eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which for me, it was like grab a tiger by the toe. But of course, then sometimes you'd have new kids who would come in and they'd want to play the remix game, which is catch an N-word by the toe. So there are some issues there. Grade 7 and 8 was somewhat challenging because that's when I was bullied quite a bit, and now a lot of people were bullied, and I know that, and I'm sorry about that. But I can tell you, with my bullying, it was picking on me and calling out the fact that I looked different. I remember in one instance I had dog poop thrown at me. I can still remember how angry my mother was that night. And I can remember my mother going and confronting that kid's mother. My mom was not to be trifled with. I can tell you that there were different instances like that. But I can also recall the stories that my parents told me of the racism that they experienced years ago, and those are their stories. And I can tell you, I can recall the times of my brother getting picked on, or my brother dealing with racism, especially when he joined the military, and those are his stories. But for myself, I definitely dealt with it. There are a couple of things that come to mind. One in particular that I'll tell you about. I was about 13 years old, and I had a friend, this girl, white girl, and we used to hang out and play together and what have you. And she had me over at her house one day, and we're playing, and I think her mom was like putting out snacks or whatever. Now, my dad always taught me, when you meet somebody, stand up straight, look them in the eye, shake their hand. Her dad came home, first time meeting her dad. So there I am, 13 years old or so. I was a little scrawny 13-year-old, stood up, outstretched my arm. Nice to meet you, sir. My name's Keith. Remember him kind of half-heartedly shaking my hand, grunting something, and then I was asked to go outside. As I was putting on my running shoes, I can still hear him in the kitchen saying, "Can somebody tell me why there's an N-word in my house?" Needless to say, I wasn't invited to stay that night. So I'd like to say that situations like that, don't happen, but they do happen, and because it had happened to me. So I can tell you, from fast forwarding a little bit, getting into the workforce, I remember working for a company, and I knew that I was around people who weren't used to speaking to Black people because of the things they'd say. I had one person come up to me and say, "Hey, Keith, you're really funny. Like, you colored guys are really funny." Like, I knew another colored guy, and he was funny too. What is it about you colored guys? I had a lady who worked at the company, a senior rep, and she came into my office one day, or my cubicle to be more accurate. She said, "Keith, something's been bothering me. Can I talk to you?" I'm like, "Sure, what's up?" She's like, I don't know what to call you. Like, are you African American? But we're in Canada, so are you African Canadian, or like Negro, or Black? Like, what should I call you? Keith. Just call me Keith. And I said that to her, and she was kind of like, this light bulb went off. It's like, yeah, I can do that. Same company. I was at the Christmas party, and I was single at the time. And I remember being in like a little semicircle group of people, and it was like colleagues and their significant others. And there was one person who was a colleague who turned as I came and said, "Oh, have you guys met Keith? He's our token Black guy." Felt like crap during that time. And I can tell you that had a huge influence, in the sense that for the longest time, I don't tend to go to Christmas parties. And the reason for that is I don't do well around ignorant drunk people. I can't be around people who can't handle their alcohol. Now, 100% that was rude, 100% that was ignorant. And if you're even thinking in terms of, "Oh, come on, now he was drunk," I will say to you, that might be your opinion, but mine is, the things that people say when they're drunk are the things they wish they had the confidence to say when they're sober. So they don't get a pass with me in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, the workplace can definitely be interesting. And I can say I've never had a job. Say that again. I've never had any job throughout my life where at least one person in said company comes and says something to me or to one of my close colleagues who's also Black, some sort of stupid, ignorant comment. Either whether it be blatantly using the N-word or just some sort of stereotype. So that's a stat I wish wasn't the case, but it is. From an interracial dating standpoint, I can tell you in my experiences and experiences of people who look like me, at some point it usually will come up, whether it be within the family, whether it be in public or in some form or fashion. I remember one time I was dating a girl. We were spending some time together, and I said to her, "Hey, you know what? Carabana's coming up, big Caribbean festival in Toronto. You should come." And I remember her reaction was, "Well, how will all those black people feel if a white girl shows up?" Which I thought was ridiculous because, first of all, if you've been to Carabana, there's tons of people of all ethnicities. But then I was really disappointed because for my life, for the most part, I am the minority in the room. I am in the room that has majority of white people, or majority of, well, usually the majority of the room is white people. And that's the life that I grew up in, and I am comfortable being in that environment. But that was the moment when I realized that a lot of white people would not be comfortable being in a room of all black people or of a different ethnicity. And I'm not talking about, oh, I'm going on holidays in Jamaica and everyone's bringing me free drinks and what have you. I'm talking about walking into a situation like Carabana, or walking into an office, or walking into a store, what have you. The level of comfortability that I have is something that that's just my life. But if the roles were reversed, then I think the mentality can be, not always, but can be very different. There's a lot of talk about policing, and I can tell you that I have had good, I have had bad, and I have had weird experiences with the police. From a good perspective, I can tell you one time I was in Vancouver, British Columbia. It was about 2:00 in the morning. I was driving home or driving back to the place I was staying at. And I was in the far right lane. I'm completely lost, like no map, no nothing. I'm completely lost. And then I look up and I think to myself, I'm actually supposed to be turning left here. There's barely any cars on the road. There was no cars on the road when I pulled this move. I went from far right and I turned left. Well, next thing you know, the cherries are on and a police officer pulls me over. Lady comes up to me and I just rolled down the window and I'm like, I'm lost. She's like, yes, clearly. She's like, what's happening? And I showed her my ID. I let her know I was from Ontario. I told her I was trying to go where I was trying to get to. She gave me directions, told me about some things to do while I was in Vancouver, and I'm on my way. So that's a good scenario. A not so good scenario, I recall, was years ago. I was hanging out with Cher and one of her girlfriends, so two white women, and we're outside of a house. Police officer comes up, pulls down the window. Ladies, are you okay? Yeah, we're fine. Not, hey, are you guys okay? Hey, are you guys having a good time? But basically saying, is this black man bothering you? Recall another time where I was in the car and probably I'd left a restaurant in the car, not even 3 minutes. Police officer comes, pulls me over. You fit the description of somebody that we're looking for in the neighborhood. We heard that somebody was erratically driving and you fit the description. Okay. I was just at a restaurant. Can I see your ID? Can I see this? Where are you going within that whole, rigmarole? Not really a great experience. Not something that I talk to a lot of my white friends who they've experienced, but that's something that I went through. And when I talk about weird experiences, so when my parents family moved into a neighborhood, and I don't want to talk it up, but it was a nice house, a very nice neighborhood. And one day I walk into the house and I got my headphones on, I'm listening to music, and I set off the alarm. And by set off the alarm, I don't put in the code, and in a certain amount of time the alarm goes off. Police end up coming. So the police come to the house, and I'm accused of breaking into the house. I said, well, no, I didn't break into the house. I live here. And they said, well, no, you broken into the house and all this stuff. And I'm standing and I'm like, come into the house. You see that family portrait over there? That's me. And they were still skeptical. It's like, what? I broke into the house and before I stole things, I'm hanging up pictures? So that was a whole thing. I remember one of the neighbors came over and said, oh yeah, that's Keith, he lives here. And then, and only then, did the cop calm down. But that would be what I would consider to be a very weird experience. Totally get they're doing their job and they're coming over to investigate, but I shut off the alarm. I'm showing the guy ID, and he's still very skeptical. So was what I would consider to be a weird experience. So I say these things to you, and again, they're experiences, they're my experiences, but you can talk to any person of color and they will tell you about things that have happened to them. And that's unfortunate. And that's the whole mentality that we need to get out of. Let me give you something recent. So earlier this year, I was accredited for the Sundance Film Festival. I was very excited about that. As you cross things off your bucket list, you start adding on new things. And one of the things that I added on was I wanted to cover all of the major film festivals in the world, like the Cannes Film Festival, the Berlin Film Festival, and of course, Sundance. Sundance is in Utah. Utah is a red state. And by red state, I mean a Trump supporting state. But it's more religious Trump supporting as opposed to some of the states down south, which is more racially charged Trump supporting, or at least so I thought. I want to tell you about a couple of situations that I dealt with this past year at the Sundance Film Festival. Now, any film festival you're dealing with, for the most part, you've got, I'd say 10% of the people are staff that work for the festival, and then the other 90% are volunteers. So in both situations, I'm dealing with volunteers. I went to this theater, and I guess before I tell you about this experience at the theater, I would tell you that I've gone to the Toronto International Film Festival, let's say for about the last, let's say 7 years. I think it's 8, but let's say 7. And each year I see 40 movies. So that's about 280 movies, okay? In those 280 movies that I've seen in Toronto, I can tell you there has only been one time I was ever thoroughly checked from a security standpoint, and that was for the movie Roman J. Israel Esquire with my twin Denzel Washington. I realized at that screening that Denzel Washington was a big deal because they had bomb-sniffing dogs there. Excuse me. Everybody was getting seriously checked at that screening. Otherwise, it's basically what's in the bag. Okay, go ahead, and they're getting people through. At Sundance this year, I think I saw about 30 films. So about 20 films in, there was no major security check. It was the exact same that I was used to from Toronto. Now, my friend Patrick, who has been going to Sundance for many, many, many years, is kind of like my de facto tour guide when I said I was going this year. And he said, hey, you need to go to the Sundance Mountain Resort. There's 3 different places you can see films at the Sundance Film Festival, like 3 different locations. It's kind of a triangle, each one being about an hour apart. And the Sundance Mountain Resort is like up in the mountains, and it's where Robert Redford has his like private theater. It's a theater that holds about 200 people. So I said, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to see a couple films there. So I go out, and I'm watching, first of all, I'm the only black person at this screening. And I'm watching all these people go in, and security guards just basically like this is a flashlight. And he's like, yeah, you're good. Let me see your bag. Yeah, you're good. Go in. He gets to me. He starts doing a full pat down on me. What's in that pocket? It's my phone. What's in that pocket? It's my other phone. You have 2 phones? Yep. Open up your bag. So I'm seeing movies all day. So I usually pack snacks or whatever. I've got my gloves, whatever, in my bag. Just the regular things. Just going through everything. So about 2 or 3 minutes later, in a process that usually takes about 30 seconds, I'm allowed to go in. So I start taking a couple of steps forward, and then I stop. And then I just turn around and I start watching them. Because I want to see if anyone else is going to get checked like this. No one else does. I watched him check about another 20 people. Nobody got that treatment. Okay, so I thought that was weird. So you can say, Keith, it's all in your head, and I'm all good for random searches, but if it's random, don't just do it to like the one black person that's there. I go into the theater. The theater's about half full. Again, this is a theater that holds about 200 people, so about 100 people are in there. Now, I notice there's a lot of seats towards the front, and then there's like clusters of seats in the further back rows. So a lady comes up to me and she's like, would you mind sitting at the front? And I said, I'm sorry, why? She's like, well, we have a lot of seats of 2 here, and you're by yourself, and we like to keep those seats of 2 for people who come in 2s. And I'm noticing, and there's other individual people who are coming into the theater, and they're not being told where to sit. I'm being suggested that maybe I should sit at the front. And I said, no, I'm actually going to go sit over there. She's like, well, we like to keep the seats of 2. I said, I appreciate that, but it's not assigned seating. I'm here now. I'm a paying member to this festival. So is there any particular reason why I can't sit there? And then she kind of backed down, and then I ended up going in and sitting. And again, to my point, kind of kept an eye on what was going on. Not one other person who came into that screening was suggested or told where they should sit, nor was anybody suggested or told from what I saw before as I was walking in. So I go and I see that movie. Now, the next movie I'm seeing, because I've already driven an hour out to this out of the way theater, is at the exact same place. So I'm going to see another movie. So I go back again, same security guard is letting people in, gets to me, and you'd think by now, okay, well, I checked this guy thoroughly. I'm good. He didn't really have anywhere to go. Nope. Still wants to go through the whole rigmarole and do a thorough check on me. This time I open up my jacket, kind of identifying the fact that I was pressed because I've got like this big press lanyard on. And he just kind of looks at the lanyard and then kind of quickens up the process. Is like, okay, go in. Of course, I stop and I look again. And again, no one else is getting this thorough check. Walked in, I saw the same usher. This time she didn't say anything. And I went and I sat where I wanted to sit. Patrick was joining me for this movie. He's like, hey, how's the day been? I'm like, we'll talk. That was the first interesting thing at Sundance. And again, you could sit back and say, okay, Keith, it's in your head and all this. And I'll say you're wrong. Because if other people were being randomly searched to that degree, okay. If other people were being told where or suggested where they should sit, okay. But they weren't. The second Sundance story I want to tell you, there was a member screening of a movie. And by member screening, if you're a member of the Sundance Film Institution, you get an invitation to this movie. This theater hosted about 400 people, and we were there in line probably about 40 minutes before the movie started. Again, only black person in line in front of us or behind us. Now, there's a couple behind us from, I think, New York, and they're talking, and it's like, oh, is this your first time coming, and blah, 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 and all this stuff. They seem nice enough. So we're going, and we're getting closer to the front of the line, and there's a lady at the front who, no headset, no clipboard or anything. She's just, ushering people in, like in their groups, like 2 at a time, 3 at a time, what have you. We get to the front of the line, and then she's like, oh, I'm sorry, we're full. I'm like, what? Because I was really, really excited about seeing this movie. I'm not even thinking about anything racial. I'm just like, what? I want to see this movie. What do you mean you're full? She's like, yeah. She's like, we're full. She's like, but if you go to the Sundance office, you could probably get vouchers to see something else. But yeah, this is full. I'm sorry. I'm like, all right. And I mean, taking her at her word. I mean, it's unfortunate. I was looking forward to seeing the movie, but you know what? We'll figure something else out to do. So we turn around, and then I just had a feeling. Sometimes you get that feeling. So we started walking, and I think I counted 3 steps, and then I stopped, and I turned around, and I faced back to the door. Same woman who told us the theater was full turns to that white couple from New York that were right behind us and says, oh, we have 2 seats for you, and brings them in. So I walk over to her, and I said, what was that? And she's like, excuse me? I said, you just told us that the theater was full, but the people behind us, you brought them in. She's like, oh, we just found out we had 2 extra seats. I said, found out how? I said, you're not wearing an earpiece or anything. Nobody came out and talked to you. So how did you know? She's like, oh, we just made a miscalculation and we brought them in. But she's like, but don't worry, good news. We've got 2 extra seats for you guys. I said, so a moment ago you were full and now you have at least 4 more seats. Is there a particular reason why you don't want me in that theater? Oh, no, not at all. You're completely misreading the situation. That's not it at all. So understanding that I'm in Utah and understanding that I am significantly outnumbered, for that moment, I shut up. I talked to the Sundance Film Festival afterwards, but again, somebody could come and say, oh, well, Keith, it was a miscalculation. Okay, let's play along with that scenario. Wouldn't the thing then be, excuse me, we actually have seats, please come back, as opposed to, okay, they're gone, okay, come on in, we're going to bring you into seats, to some seats to the next couple. So that was my time in Utah. I could tell you more stories, But again, it was very clear that there is a racial divide in the States, and there's very clear that there is still there is, of course, that systematic racism. That's not a made up thing. I want to tell you one more story, and this actually goes back a few years ago when the movie Django Unchained came out. Now, I see movies all the time. I think you know that. And if I've seen a movie, sometimes I'll see a movie more than once. And if I've seen a movie more than once, I feel like I can take liberties. And by liberties, I mean, if I need to go to the bathroom, I'm going to go. I remember I was in Canada, which is the west end of Ottawa, for those of you not in Ottawa. And I am 95% sure I saw this movie with the Littles, friends Derek and Colleen. And at one point in the movie, like halfway through the movie, I'm like, you know what? I got to go. I had to go to the bathroom. It happens to all of us. So I kind of did a quick check and I'm like, okay, at the end of the aisle, there is a couple. They're an older couple. I suck at guessing ages, but I'd probably say they're probably in their 50s or 60s. I'm just going to run to the washroom and come back. So I got up, I excused myself, I went to the washroom. A few minutes later, I came back. Now, when I came back, something very interesting happened. The couple at the end was a white couple, and I point that out, and I'll tell you why I'm pointing that out in a second. And by the way, anytime I mention race, there's going to be a reason to the story. It's not going to be one of those situations. This is just a sidebar. You know, sometimes you talk to people, it's like, oh, so I was at the mall the other day, and then this black guy did this. And I'm always like, okay, what does the fact that he's black have to do with the story? But I am going to tie that in. So I go to the bathroom, I come back, and as I'm passing this couple, this white couple, this elderly couple, the wife takes my hand and she's like, honey, are you okay? Now, here's the thing. This is my second time seeing Django Unchained, and I had to go to the bathroom. Now, optically, when I got up, it was at a time where there was like lots of N-words being dropped in the movie. Of course, it's a Tarantino movie. And it's also during a point where some black people were getting whipped and getting beaten. So optically, if you see me get up at that point in the movie, it looks like I'm having difficulty with the content and I need to go to the bathroom. I'm having difficulty with the content and I need to leave the theater. But in actuality, what was happening was I just needed to pee. But she didn't know that. She saw me get up, she's thinking to myself, oh my God, this movie's really affecting him. So she reached out her hand, she touched mine, she grabbed mine, and she's like, honey, are you okay? The reason that I tell you that story is because I feel that's what's been happening in our society over the last little while since this George Floyd incident. A lot of people are reaching out, they're identifying themselves as allies, and they're saying, what can I do to help? And I really appreciate that. I think we need more of that. We need more of us reaching out our hands to strangers to see what it is we can do to help. And I truly appreciate that. So over the next several days, you are going to meet a lot of people that I find very fascinating, and they're going to be giving you their perspectives on different events as it relates to race, and not just from the perspective of what happened with George Floyd, but with what's been happening in our world. I strongly encourage you to listen to them. And if you want to help, there's so many different things you can do. Feel free to reach out to me, reach out to different people, reach out to your friends, but get involved. This is a very, very important issue, which is extremely passionate to me. I cannot undo anything that's happened in my past, and I don't necessarily know that I want to, because I think it makes you stronger. But I want to ensure that it doesn't happen to other people. People of color shouldn't be in a situation where they're felt like token. I don't want to be somebody's token anything. If I'm your token black friend, quite frankly, I don't want to be your friend. I've never wanted to be hired or given an assignment or given a job or given an interview or whatever based on the color of my skin. I'd like to think it's because I'm fairly good at what I do. And I think other people would echo that sentiment. So please pay attention to this series, because this is very important, and I hope you get something out of it. If you want to have a conversation with me, feel free to reach out. And I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story and some of the different things that have happened to me. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye.